Welcome to Connect for Health, the live webinar and podcast series that helps you live a healthier life, brought to you by Cigna Healthcare Middle East and Africa, with a little bit of help from mentl. I'm Scott Armstrong, the founder of mentl, a platform that tries to tackle the stigma of mental health and help us have normal conversations around our well-being. And I'm joined by my co-host today, Alison Sharp, who is the Director of Key Accounts for MIA for Cigna Healthcare. Alison, welcome to Connect for Health.
Good morning. Lovely to be back. Lovely to see you again.
It's great to be here. And thank you for everybody for making time to be with us today. I think after the last 4 or 5 days, it's actually nice just to be connected to people. Today's is a special virtual episode, and it's a little bit different because obviously it's shaped by what we are living through. And across the GCC and here in the UAE, we are seeing heightened geopolitical tension because of the Iran conflict. And we know that even if we feel physically safe, there still can be a mental health response to that. Obviously, here in the UAE, many residents, and myself included, are expressing just how grateful they are and how safe we are for actually how well protected the country is. That said, we're still finding the sounds of interceptions and air defense quite triggering. Particularly some of the interceptions that can produce loud sonic booms, or even as my wife found this morning when she jumped out of her skin when one of the gardeners down the road started using a trimmer, which sounded a lot like a drone. So there's a lot of things that we are jumping at. So our goal today is practical. It's not politics. It's not speculation. It's not a debate. It's just how do we stay grounded? How do we protect sleep, reduce overload, support yourself and those people around us? I am delighted to say that today we're joined by an amazing guest who you will be able to ask questions of. Now, if you're watching on the YouTube video or listening on the podcast, you won't be able to get in touch with the live interactivity today. We will be asking poll questions and you can ask your questions of our expert. And I'm glad today that this is usually exclusively for Cigna Healthcare members, but for today we've opened it up to the wider public. So welcome if you're joining us for the first time live. So, who is our expert? Well, he's none other than Dr. Joseph El-Khoury, who is a consultant adult and addiction psychiatrist and a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists UK. He's also the co-founder and medical director of the Valens Clinic here in the UAE, and well known to many in the medical community. Dr. Joseph, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to hopefully useful interaction for our audience and general reflection on what's happening in the region, how we can help as doctors and as mental health professionals.
Okay, so let's kind of set the scene for many of us. When conflict suddenly becomes real for people, often we see the headlines, they're far-flung, they don't really impact us in the way that they perhaps sometimes they should, but all of a sudden it becomes very real. What are the common reactions? What are the struggles that you see? Are people reaching out to you and already having those struggles and communicating them to you? And what kind of adjustment period do you think we need to go through when something like this happens?
When we've grown up in what we call safe environment or safe ecosystems, we're not sort of in a position to expect risks to come from things that would happen in conflict. Basically, we don't think of ourselves as potentially in danger. Okay, even if you live in a dangerous city and you're hearing, things will happen in London, that you might get stabbed or whatever, the usual headline. It's not, you don't wake up and get up in the morning and think, okay, is it going to be a day where today I'm going to actually potentially die or get hurt? And that's just normal because we live in civilized societies where, crime or being serious crime at least is something that happens still relatively rarely. But when you're in a conflict zone, the threat is there and is implied, even though if it's not realistically very possible in terms of kind of the statistical part, So if you're living in a city of millions, you being hit is not necessarily something that, you're going to be able to calculate. You're going to think that you are as much at risk as the next person next door or the next person next door. And this is where the mind goes. I am a threat, I might die. And it takes about, for people, between days to hours, depending again on our background, for us to be able to process the information and adapt to this new reality. And there's a lot of elements that go into this adaptation. And you've mentioned some of them in terms of also feeling reassured that you're being protected. It's a bit like when children as well are, in a position where they know they're safe because they're with parents, But for parents, they're the ones who are responsible for their own protection. But obviously, when you're part of a society, you're part of a country, and then you delegate this feeling of safety or this feeling of reassurance to a higher authority. And I am happy, obviously, to be hearing, people feel reassured by how it's being handled. And honestly, and I'm somebody who grew up in a conflict zone and grew up in a war zone, so I'm used to unfortunately, I have the misfortune to be in a situation very similar to what we are now. The fact that you can feel that somebody's taking care of you and being honest and transparent about it plays a very big role. But we'll still have people who will not be able to use that information to feel safe and to operate functionally. And I think this is where discrepancy between people will be coming and will be sensed over the next few days and weeks.
Yeah, I think we all saw the images on social media of the Crown Prince of Dubai and the President of the UAE walking around Dubai Mall. I mean, if nothing models calm than that, I thought that was incredible. However, at the same time, two things can be true, can't they? And I know, my background as well. I feel like I'm kind of coping a little bit better than my wife, for example, who, despite seeing those amazing images, when she hears the loud booms, the interceptions, or what she imagines to be a drone, or particularly in my wife's case, sorry, Christina, constantly scanning the news. What's happening to the body and brain? Why can it feel like the danger is right here, even though sort of the logical part of the brain could tell us statistically we're much safer than being back in the UK, for example, or statistically, it's very unlikely that anything's actually going to happen to us.
Just again, to go back to the basics of biology, and I'm a psychiatrist, so I think in terms of biology. The nervous system reacts without our permission. It doesn't need our permission to do what it's supposed to do. Okay, and that's how we kind of got preserved as a species. So we have these two amazing systems called the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, which, if you might remember from school biology, basically are the ones that regulate emotion, that regulate response. And there's this very kind of useful analogy, is that if you're suddenly being attacked by a tiger, you're not gonna want to wait to see whether it's a tiger and decide what to do. You want your body to just jump and do the thing. Okay, so a boom, a loud noise, is not, again, something that's part of a natural environment. Okay, except if you're attending a wedding and there'll be fireworks. Okay, so then that system is reassured by your brain, telling it, by the way, this is a firework, it's safe, you're gonna be fine. Okay, but other than that, you hearing a loud boom anywhere in the world is gonna make you turn or at least react. But now when you're associating the boom with an actual threat, that's it. The automatic response is there and continues to be automatic, even when you've tried to reassure it and explain to it, well, that boom is actually an interceptor, or that boom is actually a jet, which we knew over the last few days. For example, we had more jets around and we heard the noises. And before, when you're hearing the noise of airplane, you just expected it was Dubai airport, so you're going to have normal flights, Emirates flying, take a picture of it. But now you're reacting differently because you're thinking fighter jet, danger, everything else that's coming. Now, your wife and you obviously have different nervous systems and a different way of processing this. And it doesn't mean that she's the weak one and you're the strong one. It just means that you need different adaptation mechanism and you need different ways of focusing. So my advice, first of all, is not to overinterpret the booms, but obviously we have very clear guidance on what to do for these booms. Okay, and once the first shock of the war happened, now we need to have almost like a organized process to go like, okay, boom, that's what I do. It might be something very simple as like, I'm gonna go in and sit somewhere where there's no window, or I'm gonna maybe go in and just have a cup of tea. It's just about no longer just allowing that nervous system to do what it's doing automatically, now that you have the information to be able to control it. I hope that makes a bit of sense.
To be fair to my wife, I've got a bit of an advantage because I've got ADHD. I take Zoloft and I also take ADHD medication, so I'm already got a bit of an advantage over her. Alison, I'm going to bring you in here because I think Dr. Joseph also started he talked about people's different backgrounds, and you had a question around that. We were talking off camera.
I think one of my favourite things about the UAE doctor is that it's such a mix of nationalities. And you mentioned yourself a second ago that you have experienced conflict before. So this isn't necessarily a new thing for you, but for others, it is very new. So what would your advice be to someone who's experiencing this for the first time?
Again, very interesting. And I would say we should not make assumptions that those who've actually experienced conflict before are more resilient, because it's not true. And actually, the research shows that if you've been traumatized before, the chances of you being re-traumatized by the experience of something similar is quite high. So the bravado, again, is a defense mechanism for some people. They want to show off that they've been through things and validate that experience. And that's completely fine. We do, obviously, having grown up in a conflict zone, you do have some automatic responses that are very helpful, that for example, what to do. So when you get that flight response seems to be channeled into a useful response because you've done it before, okay? And I always make that out. Military still have actually fight or flight response, but it's channeled because they've been trained to do it, okay? They will still feel there's a boom, they're not completely thing, but they've been trained to react in a certain way, even automatically when that happens. So people who don't have the experience of conflict will not necessarily be the ones who are more frightened or more think. They might have more questions, or they might need more adaptation time, or they might need to, again, learn how to channel that. And this is why, again, the advice that's being given, that's very generic and but it's still very actually useful, is a way to kind of ground yourself into a useful response. And let's not forget, you don't have to have been through a conflict to have been somebody who's been experiencing trauma or experience of crisis. We've had COVID. I mean, COVID was quite a traumatic experience for many people. But again, society as a whole, including the UAE, showed a lot of resilience. So people adapted to being locked down, adapted to, for example, not having social or any other type of interaction, of shifting their life dramatically, of losing income. So all these did actually happen at some point. Plus, again, people do have their own personal experience of challenges that they should draw on, and even me, for example, yes, I did grow up in a conflict zone, but I was a child then. Now I'm a father. A very different response. At the time, I was the one being protected and trying to ask questions. Now I'm the one providing answers and protecting and shielding my children from the questions. So I've had to adapt, and I've had to, again, remind myself that I'm not in the world that I grew up in. This is different, and the rules are different, and war has evolved over time. So even going back to what Scott was saying, even now the weapons being used are different. So even saying, okay, well, I'm used to knowing what a sound means. Well, sounds these days are very different, because most of the sounds we're hearing now are actually sound, as we said, of interception, not of things crashing. So do we respond differently to these? Yes, but again, we need to know what, again, we're being told, and that trust what we're being told. And trust is not something that gets acquired overnight. If we hadn't had trust in the bigger picture, we wouldn't be able to trust now just in time of crisis. And that applies, again, at government level, but that applies also at leadership level, corporate level, any kind of level.
Thank you. It was super interesting to hear that if you've experienced it before, that's not necessarily an advantage. It can be triggering. And you mentioned earlier that know the instructions that you should follow, know what to do in each scenario. But when you're having that flight or fight reaction, would you recommend any like breathing exercises? Is there anything that we can do ourselves to try and calm ourselves out of that fight or flight reaction?
We still need the fight or flight reaction, but we need it, again, challenge and control. But okay, we need to respond to a sound or to an instruction or to the alarm. I don't know if you remember the first night, the alarm that kind of went out in the middle of the night.
Yes.
Woke up a lot of people, and that, again, shook a lot. But I was joking with my wife. I said to her, the point of an alarm is to shake you. The point of an alarm is to wake you up. So the alarm, by the name, cannot be too soft. It cannot be ignored. It should not be. It's like a fire alarm in a building. If it doesn't annoy you, you're not going to leave the building. So when the alarm comes out, it's telling you need to do something. Now, the question is, what do you need to do? If you're not prepared, you're going to be all over the place. So preparation is key here. Okay, and preparation is just a few, sometimes very simple steps. Okay, do I know where I go when this happens within my house? Do I know what I need to carry with me? Okay, And if I have 3 or 4 answers, that's it. The only thing I need to do is to take myself and go to a certain place. And it could be I need to just sit in place. If I'm already in a safe place, I just need to sit. Now, if I'm still feeling very anxious and with over responsive and hyperactive, we need to basically get in touch with our senses. And that word actually coming back to your senses actually is grounded in neurology. It just means I need to be in touch with my 5 senses, which are the way what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling. And the best way to do that is to use them. Okay, so for example, being able to look at something that is very clear in front of me that, for example, can reassure me. It could be even an image in my brain. Touching something, okay, that is, again, feels good. And again, analogy with children, the little blanket that they touch when they want to feel that they're stressed. It could be a stress ball, or it could be my phone. It could be anything like that. It could be moving my feet the way I do on airplanes when I want to get that, that kind of blood flow going, because the tension in your muscle and the tension that you're using in your body reminds you of your reality, of grounding yourself. So I'm not telling people use mindfulness, use yoga. You can't do these things when you're in that situation, but there are things and elements of it that are very simple. But you have to practice in advance. You cannot just suddenly make them up in times of crisis. So you need to know what relaxes you at the time. And for that, you need to practice. And it could be what works for you, Alison, doesn't work for me at all. And that's why I don't like to give too specific advice, because people feel then guilty that it's not working on them. But each one of us have their way of doing something. Eating a snack, preferably healthy, but it's okay if it's not healthy in that time. If it's sugary and makes you, again, reconnect with your body, is still okay. But the most important thing is to get you to safety. And that requires the brain taking over that initial panic response.
I can see some questions coming in, and thank you for that, and keep your questions coming. We will get to them in a moment. Just as you were talking there, Dr. Joseph, about different types of people and how we react to things differently, and not turn this into a personal therapy session, but I can see, my wife will admit that she is a control freak. She likes to have control over a situation and is less fluid. And I think sometimes I will go with the flow, whereas she's one of these individuals that likes to control every aspect. And this is quite an uncontrollable time. So how does, even from a psychological point of view, doing some of those things and practicing that help give her or give those people who like control a sense of, at least there is some element of this that I can actually take control over and focus on, and maybe feel a bit better?
Again, the best way for people who need control is, as you said, to have some element of control, whatever it is, even on something, okay? And it could be that it's about deciding how the routine of the house is during this period of crisis, okay? So let's say, Scott, you're not somebody who really needs the routine or the control to feel that you're safe, okay? But you're with somebody who needs the safety, the safety and control. Then allow them to run the household, even if it bothers you or frustrates you or you think it's too much. And again, we see this problem within couples when they're under stress, okay? If one of them is like, oh, come on. And I just had a case actually the other day when somebody was like, I can't stand the fact that, for example, my husband opens the windows and goes outside to check the planes when they're heating, and I want to be inside. And I said, well, you go inside with whoever is important to you, and you tell your husband, this is making me feel uncomfortable. But if he continues to do that, there's no point fighting him. But if I was the husband, I would try to override my own needs for curiosity, just to be able to help my wife, who feels that my safety is part of her control safety zone. So this is why dialogue is important, and not being, again, critical of other people's responses. Yes. There is no one way to do this, let's be honest. And as you said, probably 95% is outside our control, but there is still 5% within our control. And, again, this is dangerous what we're going through, but compared to a lot of other conflict zones where people still survived and got on with their life, we're still in a kind of privileged position, and let's use that. Let's use that amount of control. Like today, I came to work, I'm in my clinic on the 30th floor. Yesterday, I was working from home. And again, it's a decision based on risk assessment that is very personal. And that's about control as well, about me deciding to a certain extent what is safe and what is not safe.
I love that. I'm going to bring some questions from the audience in now, before we get to our first poll of the day. And this is, I think, a great one for all of the expats living here as well. Nicole's asked a question, and also Hamza has asked a very, very similar question. Which is, so Hamza asks, while we feel safe and supported here, our families back home remain highly anxious due to the constant exposure of news and social media. Their worry is growing, the disbelief, it adds emotional strain. How can we help them stay grounded without exhausting ourselves? And that really gels with Nicole's question as well, which is how best to explain to others not living here that we're managing relatively well without alarming them. You know, the sounds of boom and the government is protecting everybody, but they tend to focus on the headlines. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but some of the headlines, particularly internationally, are, let's say, not objective. I think that you know, they're more geared towards deriving profit from panic rather than an objective sense of what's actually happening. So for those, you know, for us as expats who have those relatives, who have those loved ones and friends around the world, how do we communicate that we're okay without overloading ourselves?
I'm really glad somebody asked that, because it's something I've been thinking about myself, and I'm struggling with, that you feel calm, but then you've got a lot of family members who are inundating you, and it's sometimes you just want them to kind of, you know, give you a little bit of a break, but then you also don't want to not respond, because that can make them worse. So it's like, how do you communicate, make sure that they know that you're okay, but then also set a little bit of a healthy boundary to say, you know, to kind of protect yourself from it. I'm glad people ask, because I have the same question.
And like, while many of us have come to understand and accept that this might be the norm for a few days, the only challenge we have now is convincing our extended families back home that we're safe. Dr. Joseph, go.
Interestingly, we have to handle the communication the way communication is being handled with us at the same time. So in the sense of, we almost have to provide maybe a daily or twice daily report to our family. So this way they know what's happening. So instead of waiting for the question to be asked, you know, establish a communication framework where you go, listen, I'm going to WhatsApp you in the morning when I wake up and I'm having my coffee or whatever. And then I'm going to WhatsApp you in the evening and I'll tell you what's happening. If anything happened, I will WhatsApp you. That's the first thing. And again, some relatives are better than others at accepting that, but we have to always maintain some boundaries. Otherwise, we're literally just feeding information. And just yesterday night, again, when there was a boom, I hadn't heard the boom, and then my sister in Lebanon just sent like, "Are you guys okay?" And I'm like, "But we're watching TV. What's going on?" And then I had to go on Twitter to find out that there was something. And I could have easily continued my show. And then I'm like trying to explain to her, and I said, "Okay, listen, I'll let you know if something happens. We're sitting here watching TV. I'll let you know that something happened." So I think having that communication, taking control of communication, is very important. The other thing, talk about other things. Continue to joke on the WhatsApp group, the family WhatsApp group. Continue to share memes. Talk about the trip that you guys are gonna go go on in 3-4 months. This way, with time, they'll just realize that we don't need to talk about this. And the fact that I'm not talking about the war doesn't mean I don't care about you. Because we have to remember as well, a lot of people think if I don't ask about you, it means I don't care about you. But that's not really a good way of establishing the level of care. Okay. And before, in the first few days, it was understandable. There was a bit of chaos. Nobody knew what was going on. But now that we entered a bit of a kind of a semi-chronic thing, it becomes exhausting, and it means it's distracting and you have to deal with other people's anxiety. But in reality, they're safe. So their anxiety is secondary to your anxiety. Your anxiety needs to take the priority here. You need to manage yours because you are in a place where things are happening. And then there's a secondary. But if they're not going to help you do it, then you set the boundaries in a very kind and gentle and accepting way.
I'm going to bring in our first poll of the day if I can. We have got more questions coming in. So after this poll, we will get back to those questions as well. Keep them coming. So our first poll of the day, which is, which support would be most useful to you? A plan to limit news and social media without guilt, tools to calm anxiety fast, sleep protection strategies, supporting children or family without spreading fear. And I want to come back to that after this poll question, because we have had some audience questions as well. Staying productive at work without burning out, also a good one, or knowing when to seek professional help. Which of those do you need the most support with right now, would you feel? While people are answering that question, Dr. Joseph, what are you seeing? Which of those do you think is either the most useful or you're seeing people struggle with the most?
I think sleep is the one that is causing most problem because, again, let's not remember, we have to be alert, or at least part of us have to be alert because we're in an unusual situation, and this is what the recommendations are. But being alert and sleep just doesn't go well together because the whole point of sleeping is that you're in this kind of safe zone where you don't really bother with anything. Now, and you sleep, if you're anxious, your sleep will be less deep, so you'll get less of that deep sleep. You might get more of the REM sleep, more of the shallow sleep, which doesn't have the same quality. So you're tired the next day and you're exhausted, even if you actually slept 7-8 hours. Okay. So, and I cannot tell people, just don't sleep because that's not going to be realistic. But for example, if you have kids and you feel that you're sleeping in a part of the house where you feel you're not as safe, then move the sleep to another part of the house where you're just going to sleep. Okay. All is relative, but we know that there are parts of the house that are more safe than others. And again, there have been clearly some recommendation around that. Another thing, it could be if you, again, two of you are there, one person could sleep a bit later than the other, another person can wake up a bit, so you can take roles as a family with that. And again, I'm noticing that as days progress and as we feel that things have calmed down a bit, people are now trusting that the system is in place, that anyway, if they wake up in panic, they still know what to do and direct themselves. So once you have the tools to know what to do in the middle of the night if something happens, you're going to sleep more comfortably. Now, we're not going to advocate for medication or anything, and I don't think this is need for most of them. But again, taking some supplements sometimes to make sleep more comfortable, there's nothing bad with it. They're safe. Magnesium, melatonin, some of this stuff is available out there, but you need to sleep. And just saying to yourself, I'll sleep when this is all over, that's not helpful. We don't know how long that's going to take. And even your body and nervous system, even if everything finishes, might not rewire itself to sleep normally later. So you need to find a way to sleep at this stage, given what I just mentioned.
It feels like so many issues kind of come out of that lack of sleep, which we'll move on to in a minute. Results from the poll: yes, sleep is for 1/5 of people. That's one of the things that they could do with sleep protection strategies. But thank you to the audience as well for naturally segueing me into my next question, which is actually that supporting children or family without spreading fear is the thing that they want the most help with. And that's actually gels with some questions that have been coming in. Swati, you've asked, how do you recommending managing children and explaining this situation, even though they can't fully comprehend it? My 9-year-old is constantly sticking to me when the explosion sound is there. And also, I saw a question coming in from Desiree. For my question, again, is how to communicate with our kids, especially for those who are experiencing this for the first time. Animal asking about children? No. So there we go. So I mean, and that is a great question. You can see behind me. I mean, I'm a dad of a 10-year-old. How do we let them know what's going on honestly without, amplifying the fear, but at the same time, not unvalidating what they're going through in a way by trying to pretend that nothing's happening?
Children come in different age segments, and it's very hard to give one advice for age. And even within the same age segment, you have people, kids are more mature than others and more in tune with what's happening. I think, first of all, understanding what your kid already knows, because they have more than one source of information, and you're not the main source of information most of the time, especially for the older children. So I think not lying is the first thing. I think I would not lie, especially, again, I mean, kids under 3 or 4 or 5, you can do a white lie. It's not a problem. But again, above, I would use part of the information. Need to know basis. Okay, what do they need to? And at the same time, you cannot pose a problem to the children without posing a solution. So you cannot tell the children it's not safe outside without telling them what they need to do. Because again, children love control. Control is how they see things. They want their life to be safe. You're the guarantor of their safety. They trust you, and they listen to you most of the time. But they also need to trust themselves, their own kind of instinct. And now they're in a position where you're telling them things that you weren't telling them yesterday. And they're very sensitive to change. So why is daddy now telling us we can't go in the garden? before you weren't. What's happening? Okay. They can actually pick up on the tone of your voice, and they can pick up on the conversation you're having with your wife, literally, and go, okay, daddy, what's happening? You know, why are you talking this way? Why did you change the tone of your voice? What's happening outside? And again, in conversation with, by the way, with relatives, because that does happen. You know, you pick up you're talking to people, and then suddenly you're like, somebody says, "Are you guys okay over there?" And then you have your child sitting next to you, going, "What's going on, Dad? You know, why is my grandma asking that question? What's going on?" So you have to kind of have a bit of information there, but also provide the solutions. You could say, for example, there are some planes out there and they're making a lot of noise, and we're advised to stay indoors. Okay, that's for a certain younger age. And then turn it into a game. Turn it into, okay, fine, we're gonna stay indoors until they tell us we can go outside. Okay, and then the kid feels they're in control. I mean, I'm doing this with my 5-year-old, and she loves it. She's coming and telling, "Daddy, today we can't go out." Correct? We can't go out. So when I came to work, she's like, "Why did you go out, Daddy?" And I have to explain that, Daddy, they're allowing dads to go out now. You're not allowed. So it's part of them feeling, "Oh, we're in charge, we're in control, we can do things." And that not disempowered. So daddy feels safe, daddy can make me feel safe, but I also play a role in making myself feel safe. So gamification of that is good for younger children. Older children, you're not going to explain the full geopolitical context, but you can say and explain that conflicts happen, that people disagree on things, and sometimes they use violence to settle problems, but that's obviously not a good thing. But in the meantime, we're going to have to actually protect ourselves so that, this passes and then we can get on with our lives. That could be about the headline, but you need to know your child and know what they know and their personality to be able to kind of tailor it exactly to them.
We've got so many questions still coming in from the audience, which is great. This session is for you. I think this will resonate with quite a lot of, you were talking about slightly older children. I mean, to a varying degree, many of our older teenage children might already have access to social media. So they may know more about, or they may think they know more about what is happening. How do we manage that? But also, how do we manage ourselves? I mean, and again, I say that from a personal experience where I've seen my wife who could almost not put the phone down. She's doom scrolling all the time. I'm a former journalist for many, many years, so I can go onto social media and I can sift through that's AI, that's not, and I can look at international headlines and go, actually feel a bit angry about them because it's like that's a completely unfair portrayal of what's happening. But I can make that objective call, whereas our teenagers and some people that literally just are getting sucked into this endless doom scrolling, how do we manage that? Because that feels like that's almost amplifying a set of tensions that are already there, obviously.
What I would do, again, if I had sort of older children, I would almost have like a little mini briefing in the morning, and mini briefing in the evening. Today, how was last night? How did you guys sleep? Okay, everybody slept okay, great. So today, let's go through the news together. Let's just see what's out there. And each one of you tell us what you've heard. And then you're lucky you're a journalist, you have more of that. But even anybody with, again, some understanding of what's going on is able to kind of bring down that information to useful, something like what we're going to do with this information. Okay. Information is useless if you're not going to be able to do something with it. And then this way, everybody goes, okay, this is interesting. And there's a lot of repetition online. What people don't realize, they're taking the same story from 15, 20 different angles. But every angle feels like a new story. So when we're seeing the same video, and that happened, for example, when we had the Fairmont thing, it was the same thing, but it felt like 6, 7 explosions. And every time your body and your mind had to react and create more stress. Oh my God, what is this? But actually, it's just perspective on the same story. And I would say on social media, maybe this is an opportunity, again, if your children have access on social media, to be able to train them on how to use social media in time of conflict and intensifying of messages. And I would say, even when they're not interested in, that generation is not interested in politics or geography, it's a time to be able to maybe turn their curiosity towards this rather than just fear and doom scrolling. Okay, let's try to understand a bit, about some history, some of that stuff, neutralize and use our kind of more developed brain as opposed to our very emotional brain, which is just telling us, oh my God, what's happening. We've done that reaction, it's there. Now let's try to do more with it. It's difficult, and I'm not, again, making it too simplified, but it's one way of doing it that's actually very accessible to us.
I do want to flip the direction of the conversation more to work, because there's been, and if I look at the questions coming in on the chat, there's a lot of work-related questions. So Mohammed had asked, what healthy boundaries and routines can individuals set to avoid burnout, when they're trying to juggle what's going on, keeping an eye on the news, and then still meet your kind of work requirements. And then just to top that up, I spotted another question that I was asking for advice for managers who are supporting teams through this. So if we could cover, what advice would you give for kind of the more workplace challenges that we're dealing with?
Dubai, for example, is a business city. It's a city where people work, where work is a very important part of our life. And as managers or directors, we have to make decisions that will impact people's safety and people's lives. So it's not just about career progression. Now it's about am I putting my people in danger? Okay, and that's why I said earlier again, trust in a manager or in a government authority cannot be built overnight, and in time of crisis. You have to have built that early on, so that people follow your advice and know that you care, okay, and that you are being humane about them. And this way, they will follow you. And you have to lead with example. You cannot be at home, sitting there, sending your people to work and tell them, oh, okay, I'm not coming to the office, but I want you all at the office. That's just not gonna work, okay? They will come and they will spend more of their time really being resentful of you or putting themselves in danger, quote unquote. And again, going back to the visit of some of the emirs and the sheikhs to Dubai Mall and other things. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Okay, if I'm there, I'm safe. You're going to be there. So I'd expect that from managers and leaders, but I also expect them to show some compassion and some flexibility when needed. Okay, we're not all equal in response to this. Okay, it doesn't mean again if somebody's weak, somebody's not. We have different circumstances. Having children, for example, do you want to be away from your children? Are you able to do that when they, for example, we have homeschooling? So we need more flexibility, we need awareness, and we need for people to know they can access us outside the usual boundaries. So I heard the word boundaries here. Yes, I'm still your manager, I'm still your boss, I am still dedicated also to the well-being of the company, but we could have a conversation on the side about other things now. Okay, or I could delegate somebody to do that, okay? And most companies now, again, who are aware of mental health, do have EAP programs, do have access to things. Your insurance company allows you to use a psychiatrist or psychologist, and it doesn't mean that they're going to fire you. I hear that a lot, by the way. Will they know that I sought help? Okay. First, seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist does not mean that you're hooked on medication or on therapy forever. It literally might mean that in a particular time in your life, you've needed some professional guidance and support, and that might be 1 or 2 sessions, but that in itself can be enough. And most companies these days are no longer as judgmental as before. And again, privacy is being respected and not shared. And I know, again, that in discussion with patients and with companies about what is accessed. So I would say there are a lot of more than one way for companies to support now. Remind your people that they can get help. Remind your people this is not a usual time. So some of the boundaries are different, but some of the boundaries have to be maintained for the operational thing to go on. So, and make it, again, announce it on a regular basis. Every day, I'm talking to the team, asking them, is everything right today? Any issues? Please contact me on the side. And most people are saying it's fine. Some people like to talk more than others. Be careful to engage in too much of the psychological support in the big groups, because not everybody also engages with it. It can sometimes trigger more anxiety. So if you have a group of 300 people, but you have somebody who just keeps talking to that group, and then others are not engaging, take that conversation elsewhere, encourage them to go elsewhere, and it's fine, without invalidating what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because some people don't like to talk about stress, others do. So that's what I would give, again, as a blanket.
I think there'll be lots of companies out there that could look back to the COVID times and how and the lessons they learned from COVID about how to look after their people. And mentl, we try and at Cigna Healthcare, we've been trying to encourage that as well. That's part of our mission. But also, it is worth reiterating as well. Dr. Joseph, you were saying you are safe to seek that treatment. The UAE's new mental health law specifically states that employees cannot discriminate against you if you are struggling with your mental health. So it is worth knowing that actually the government's got your back. So do feel safe to reach out and seek support. Just staying in the I think I was laughing and joking with people in my community last night with some of the dads who were saying basically like homeschooling is probably actually more traumatic than what's going on outside, and there's more noise inside the house than there is outside this house. And Heidi's asked that question as well. She's saying staying at home and work under these circumstances was also stressful. How can we balance children homeschooling, work, and the news around us while also being and staying productive? And that question is mirrored by a couple of the other people on the questions. So yeah, how do we? Yeah, and I guess this goes back to how we were in COVID in a way.
COVID in a way came so quickly and then stayed, and it just became part of our lives. While here, maybe we're hoping that things are gonna revert to normality. And let's not forget that we only have now 1 week of school. Sort of homeschooling. We don't know what next week is like. Whatever. We'll hear it from the government, from the authorities. But it's about, again, just putting this thing in place, and again, knowing when it's not going to be in place. I would say, again, and this is what I'm doing, is that me and my wife are taking shifts. So I'm able sometimes to be at home. Sometimes she's able to be at work. And when I mean at work, even within the house, because when you're at work, you're at work. Not have to be somebody walking into the room and asking you a question. So we're taking shifts, so the kids are always kind of surrounded. We've given clear instructions as much as possible. There is a bit of a cabin fever effect initially, especially if you live in another very in an apartment or something like that. But we have to remember that even the safety advice is not to stay home the whole day. We can actually walk, and we're lucky that the weather is still very acceptable. So we're not in August, so at the moment we can still go out, we can still do things, you can still go to the mall. And this way, doing small activities with your children breaks the routine of the day. Cook with your children, engage them in again, silly things at home. And it goes again to what I said about control. When times of anxiety, people like to control small things that before felt that they took for granted, but now they're loving, engaging in them because the rest of it is not control. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, engage them in cleaning the room, engage them in doing things, connect with the kids' friends next door, do it online. There's a lot that can be done. We did it in COVID for a year. We can do it for a few weeks very easily, especially that I think hopefully we will regain normal functioning very soon.
I'm going to bring in the second poll. This is honestly, the time is going so quickly, so I want to ask the second poll and then prioritize more questions from the audience because there's some great ones coming in. So yeah, let's find out, what have you struggled with most this week? Sleep, feeling on edge with the sudden sounds, difficulty focusing at work, irritability or short temper, checking news and social media too often, physical symptoms, headache, tight chest, stomach issues, feeling numb or detached. And as always, when we do these polls, I always feel like there should be an extra option, which is all of the above. But which of those do you feel it is, impacting you the most? Dr. Joseph, what do you think the answer will be? Do you think it's going to be sleep, because you were talking about that before?
I would say maybe irritability or short temper for some people. Feeling on edge. I think feeling on edge with sudden sounds.
Actually, in the clinic, since this started, what are the main queries of people reaching out to you while people vote? Get your votes in now.
We're getting people obviously feeling on edge again most of the time, which is leading to inability to focus, inability to function, overthinking, catastrophizing, and this leading into sleep. But as I always like to say, the nervous system is one of the most integrated systems in the world, and then you feel that any part of that could dysfunction. Now, interesting, I'm reading now, it's checking news and social media too often, which is a trigger, isn't it, for feeling on edge, not necessarily from sounds. But the problem is advising people not to check the news and social media is almost unrealistic completely, but I think we can control some parts of it. First of all, some accounts, why are you following them? For example, I've unfollowed many people on things that before were just innocuous accounts, but now I'm like, you're not adding anything to my safety, to my understanding of the world and of the war. So I'm gonna limit to a few of the accounts that matter. Okay, the timing is important. Not much is gonna happen from 1 hour to another. That we know. So again, why are you doing it the whole time? And I'm gonna say something. Using humor sometimes within groups, within people, is helpful. You want to talk about the situation, can be cathartic, can be relaxing. Not every scrolling is doom scrolling. You need to scroll and obviously be connected, and it's unrealistic to tell people just put your phone down and not and look at them. But I would say be more selective than usual, because at this stage, the intensification of messages online, and many of the messages are not neutral. They're not just meant to have information potential. There's a huge psychological, almost propaganda element to it, and there's a lot of misinformation, AI bots, whatever. So follow what you need, and again, not what you are attracted to, and be structured in what you follow, and do it for fun sometimes. Joke around with your family about it on groups. Share memes that are funny, not necessarily very serious images of things going off here and there that have no relation to your particular situation. Not easy to do, but even a small change can make a big difference.
I will add to that, just speaking as a former journalist as well. Even, if you read some of the international media, I think I said at the outset, sort of profit from panic. When you read headlines, please recognize that actually, often superlatives or, over exaggerated words are used purely to bring you in. So, I think I've seen the word horror. I've seen the fact that we're all cowering here, and we know that we know objectively that's not our reality. So plus, the minute you click on those, your algorithms on social media are just going to feed you more and more and more of that. So I think we have to be very, very intentional about how we dial in. And yes, again, speaking as a former journalist, in this day of 24-hour coverage, actually it is better, I would say, to dial in 2 or 3 times a day for meaningful updates, rather than trying to track everything, because often they're trying to fill that vacuum because they want you to stay online. Clickbait words, as Nibin says. Yes, absolutely. Let's get to some of the practical things again. And Nuj has been asking a couple of questions throughout the Nuj. Thanks for your patience as well. About so if I go back, he was asking about nutrition and how can nutrition help us, and how we how particularly, and that's an interesting question, because obviously we're also still during Ramadan as well, where people are fasting, so that's going to have an impact on them. And he also asked the question, are there specific breathing exercises that can help somebody when they're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, or perhaps on the verge of a panic attack? So let's kind of just focus on the last sort of, because we've got less than 10 minutes left, on some practical measures that people can do. So diet, nutrition, we've mentioned the importance of sleep, and breathing.
Comfort eating is a stress reaction, and a lot of people tend to then spend the time eating crisps or chocolate or other things. And yes, it does make you feel better and can distract you from what's happening, but the impact on guilty, yeah, as well. So that guilt feeling that you then carry with you just adds to this sensation of losing control. And as I said, what we want when everything around us is not controlled is to control some elements of our life. So I would advocate for small meals, healthy snacks, and maintaining a certain routine. Go out of your way to eat healthy during this period more than usual, because this is about, again, feeling that you are controlling something. Imagine, for example, if you emerge of the next 10 days having lost the 2 kilos you have always wanted to lose. It sounds maybe petty and vain, but but that's a part you controlled, as opposed to the other parts where you have nothing to do but listen to the advice. So I would go with that. Vitamin D, if you're staying indoors a lot, definitely vitamin D supplementation is very helpful. But just generally, again, common sense nutrition, okay, and variety. Do not eat the same thing every day, because that's people are stocking up. But with time, variety with food helps you, again, gets your dopamine higher and everything. So it helps you with feeling good about yourself. Now, the second, I think, element was, I forgot the second part of the question.
Breathing, I think they were asking, Anuj was asking about.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, breathing, again, there's a very simple rule with breathing. If you breathe slowly, you're going to feel better. If you breathe fast, too much oxygen is going to make you feel dizzy, loss of control, reaction of your nervous system. So deep breath in, deep breath out. practice it so that when you do it in times of tension, it is actually well done. If you don't practice it, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to feel over.
Mahmoud, Mahmoud's asked, he says, I understand that a lot of what you're saying today comes from theoretical frameworks and studies and research. Okay, right. So let's get real then. What from your personal experience beyond your sort of clinical academic perspective has been the one practical piece of advice that you would share that has truly helped you manage stress during periods of geopolitical tension? That's a big one. And Joffy's asked a question, which I think will then connect to that, which is how do you stop catastrophizing?
The research, as I said, is mostly from the military. Okay, over history, there's a whole science of dealing with tension and practice. Now we need to translate it to the civilian population, and you're right, it cannot be done completely. So it's not completely theoretical. These are actually things that are tested and used. For me, again, like I said, I could go on about my experience growing up in Lebanon and being bombed and being shot at, but that requires another talk, and I'm not sure it's not interesting for everybody. But for me, I'm the kind of guy who prepares. I like to prepare. I like to rehearse, and that's what makes me feel good. Okay. And honestly, the first night was tough. I couldn't sleep. Now I'm sleeping, and I'm making sure that I know how to react when I'm hearing these sounds. And yeah, that's just me, but it doesn't mean that we work for others.
Alison, I'm going to tag you back in. And also because obviously the Connect for Health, usually this is open for Cigna members, but what support is out there? Dr. Joseph was talking as well about, often within your insurance packages, there might be EAPs, there might be this. What kind of help should people be looking for, or could people look for from their coverage?
Depending on the product that you have with Cigna, for the Cigna members listening, you might have an employee assistance program, which is really just counselling. So that can be done on video calls, it could be telephone calls, that may be included in your plan, or you may have it through your employer. So worth checking these things. Many of our products also include telehealth. So if you're not comfortable leaving the house, if you would rather be at home, you could be just juggling a million things, and finding the time to go to the doctor is tough at the moment. So many of our products include the telehealth. We also have a travel safety app, Safe Travel by Cigna, that you may have. And then all of our products, no matter what one you're on, you'll always have a customer service 24/7 helpline number. So if there's anybody out there kind of worried about, we've had questions on things like medication supplies, if you're looking for a bit of support there, that's something that we can always try our best to help with. So yes, lots of support available for the Cigna members.
Great advice. Thank you very much for that. I want to bring in just one more question from the audience before we begin wrapping up. And again, kind of coming back to the expat question as well, those families, and a number of people have asked, and I'm sorry I can't get through all your names, but what's the best way to create, so Alizi's asking, the best way to create emotional, financial stability, both for the parents and for the children here, because there's that push-pull, particularly, right now we've got some people who are tuning in who, like you, Dr. Joseph, from Lebanon. So not only are they impacted here in their life right in front of them, but they've got relatives back home who are also struggling with this. So how do you create that stability or that foundation that you can actually navigate through both of those the challenge is multi-layered?
Definitely, and again, it will probably get more and more complicated as we go on. For me, it's more about, do we have enough options? Do we create enough options for ourselves so that we can deal with whatever might come up? Okay, I always, even in therapy, I advise people. I say, listen, don't put a plan. Plans, they collapse, they fall apart. Okay, you had a plan for what was going to happen in March, and look at it. Create options for yourself as much as possible. Okay. And this is something now in crisis you can still do, but do it when things are quiet. Look at, the world is unsafe, unsettled. So create all these financial options for yourself, this emotional options for yourself, and you don't need to run from anywhere at the moment, because honestly, there's nowhere to really run completely. And I think that ultimately creating support networks that are realistic and that are proactive between people here, people in other places where there is conflict, people where in other places where it's safe and feel guilty, because these people also unfortunately need to be reassured, they need to be supported, but the balance needs to be also very, very clear. If you're under threat, you're the one who needs support more than the others. And keep these boundaries very clear and protect yourself. And if you don't need to answer every single phone call, you don't need to be all the time on the WhatsApp group. And they need to understand that. And you also need to understand that you don't need to reassure them. So a lot of them here to unpack. But I think protect yourself so you can protect others. If you're not protected and you're not healthy and well and in a good position, you're not going to be able to support.
Before I say thank yous and goodbyes, just want to let the audience know as well, if you keep an eye out over the next day or two, I think there's an interesting podcast that we did here for Connect for Health with Dr. Johan Zwimmer, who's talking about health literacy. And one of the things he was saying is that actually know what's inside your policy, because there is more support there than perhaps you might realize. So check that out. That's a really good one. We also still have a podcast on there around nutrition, particularly during Ramadan, which is a fantastic one. So go and check that out so you can prioritize your nutrition. And there is also an episode there about resilience, both about children's resilience and our resilience. So you may find some helpful insights in those. So go to Cigna Healthcare's YouTube channel and search for Connect for Health, and you'll find those episodes there. As usual, I've overrun. I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you for all your questions. Dr. Joseph, if people ask questions, we couldn't quite get to it, how do they find you on social media so they can bombard you with more questions?
I'm mostly on X. That's where I have my public profile. So it's JEK Psych. It's not difficult to find me. It's not only about psychiatry. I do other things as well. But and if they want to reach out to me, again, we have the website of the clinic, and I'll be more than happy to help.
Brilliant. Thank you. Alison, thanks very much for being part of the conversation today. Great working with you today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Scott. Thank you very much. And thank you, Doctor. Your very honest answers have been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for tuning in today. It's great just to feel connected again. So Connect for Health is actually, you feel, we are still all part of a great community. Stay healthy, stay safe, listen to the government's advice as well, and we will see you very, very shortly. After the session's finished, you will be asked for feedback. Please give us your feedback. It is a gift. It just helps us shape these sessions. So from Cigna Healthcare and Mental, thank you very much and stay safe.